Picture a girl sitting in a cramped flat in England. She's 11 years old. Her family has just moved back from America, not because they wanted to, but because the dream had run out. The auditions had dried up. The money was gone. Her father had gambled everything, savings, stability, a life in England, on the belief that his daughter had something special, and it hadn't paid off. She had been told she was too mature. She had auditioned for one of the biggest shows on television and been turned down cold. She was exhausted, embarrassed, and seriously considering whether any of this was worth it. 3 years later, that same girl would be on the cover of Time magazine. She would become the youngest person ever nominated for a Primetime Emmy in her category. She would be named one of the most influential people on the planet. But on that particular night, in that flat in England, she was just a kid who had almost given up. This is the story of how Millie Bobby Brown almost didn't become 11 and why the world should be very grateful she didn't quit. To understand how close we came to never having 11, you have to go back to the very beginning. Not to Stranger Things, not even to Hollywood. You have to go back to Marbella, Spain, in February 2004, where Millie Bobby Brown was born, the third of 4 children of British parents Kelly and Robert Brown. The family moved back to England when Millie was 4, settling in Bournemouth. From the very start, something about Millie was different. She wasn't drawn to playgrounds the way other kids were. She was drawn to performances. While her peers were watching cartoons, she was drawn to musicals like Chicago and Moulin Rouge. She didn't just watch them, she studied them. She mimicked the emotional beats. She felt what the characters felt. There's also something else worth knowing about Millie, something that almost never gets mentioned in the flashy profiles. She was born with partial hearing loss in her left ear and gradually lost all hearing in that ear over several years. She has been completely deaf on one side for most of her life. Think about that the next time you watch her perform. Every whispered line, every emotionally charged scene delivered while hearing the world through only one ear. When Millie was 8, the family moved to Orlando, Florida, not for a vacation, not for a new job, but because someone had spotted something in their daughter that they believed deserved a real shot. In Orlando, Millie went to acting workshops to pass time on a Saturday, and it was there that a top Hollywood talent scout found her and told her parents that she has instincts you cannot teach, advising them that she could mix it with the best kids in Hollywood. So they listened, and they drove from Orlando to Los Angeles. What happened next is a story that almost never gets told, because by the time people were writing about Millie Bobby Brown, she was already famous. But the years before Stranger Things were not a smooth ascent. They were a financial freefall. Robert Brown liquidated savings to fund acting lessons, headshots, agency fees, and the endless expenses of pursuing child stardom. By the time Millie was 9, the family was broke. Within 3 months of being in Hollywood, Millie was cast as young Alice in ABC's fantasy drama series Once Upon a Time in Wonderland. Then, in November 2013, after just one self-taped audition without even meeting the producers or directors, she was offered the role of Madison O'Donnell in BBC America paranormal drama thriller series Intruders. Millie had broken through. She was a working actress. But Intruders ran for 1 season and then it was done. The momentum slowed. She then made guest appearances in NCIS, Modern Family, and Grey's Anatomy. Respectable credits for a 10-year-old, but not enough to sustain a family of 6. During a conversation with the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, Millie opened up about the financial struggle. I kept getting no's, and I was like, it's okay, it's going to happen. And they're like, yeah, because we're running out of money. She felt like I had to make money for my family, she told Glamour UK. I was 9 years old, and I felt that pressure. Brown says she grew up with no money, and the financial insecurity of her upbringing has affected her relationship with money even after achieving success. She has openly talked about the financial struggles they faced, noting they once had to live with an aunt. There was even a time when they were close to returning to the UK as the money was running out. It is difficult to fully comprehend the weight of that. A 9-year-old girl walking into audition rooms carrying not just her own dreams, but the financial anxiety of an entire family. And then she started getting told something that cut even deeper than the rejections. She was told she was too mature. At just 10 years old, Brown faced a casting director who told her she was too mature for the industry. I always knew I was mature, but being told it wasn't good, it was so hurtful, she shared. There's a cruel irony buried in that rejection. The very quality that would eventually make Millie one of the most celebrated young actors of her generation, her emotional depth, her quiet intensity, the way she seemed to carry something heavier than her years, was being used against her. She was too much, too real, too present. Hollywood, at that moment, didn't have a box for her. A blow like that could have crushed anyone's dream at that age, and Millie was close to quitting, but her parents didn't have it. Instead of letting her give up, they encouraged her to take one last shot. And so, still in the thick of rejection and financial pressure, Millie Bobby Brown kept auditioning. She kept walking into rooms. She kept performing. Which brings us to the audition that almost became the one that ultimately led her somewhere far greater. In 2015, Millie auditioned for a role on HBO's Game of Thrones. The role was Lyanna Mormont, the young head of Bear Island. During an interview on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, Brown discussed how her audition didn't work out in her favor and how it almost put a pin in her acting career. I think I was just very disheartened by the rejection, which is something I tell everyone. It's like this industry is just full of rejection 24/7. I then auditioned for Game of Thrones, and I got a no for that. Then that's kind of when I was like, oh, this is really difficult. I guess I really wanted that role. Bella Ramsey would ultimately play Lyanna, which may have been for the best for both actors. Ramsey was extraordinary in the role and later went on to star as Ellie in The Last of Us. Two extraordinary young British actresses, both finding something far bigger waiting on the other side of near misses. But in the moment of rejection, Millie didn't know that. Having moved back to England after this, she then got a call to audition for a little show called Montauk, the original title for Stranger Things, and despite her Game of Thrones rejection, she went for it, and the rest is television history. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because before that call came, Millie was in England, re-enrolled in school, seriously reconsidering whether this was really what her life was meant to be. Sitting in England, having retreated from Hollywood, Millie received a call. Someone wanted her to audition for a new Netflix project. The show didn't have its final name yet. At that point, it was simply called Montauk, the original concept from Matt and Ross Duffer that would later develop into Stranger Things. But at the time, it was nobody's sure thing. The Duffer brothers had prepared a script similar to the series' eventual pilot, along with a 20-page pitch book. They pitched the story to about 15 cable networks, all of whom felt a plot with children as leading characters would not work, and asked the brothers to either make it a children's series or drop the children and focus on the adult investigation. Netflix had taken the leap, but it was still an unknown quantity. Nobody knew what Stranger Things was going to become. Casting director Carmen Cuba knew from the beginning that this was not going to be a typical children's casting call. This was not going to be that. It was going to be such hard work. It was going to be months on end and very specific dialogue, she said. That was helpful because from the beginning, we said, okay, no street casting for this. We're going to start with theater schools, acting coaches, kids who have been on Broadway. They saw nearly 2,000 kids internationally, but did no open calls. Everyone recognized really early on that if we had even one kid who wasn't good, it would take the whole ship down, Matt Duffer said. So we just started looking really early on. Against this backdrop, from England, came Millie Bobby Brown. Millie Bobby Brown sent in an audition tape from London early on in the audition process, and it was clear she was a contender for the mysterious 11. Cuba followed up the tape with a virtual interview in which Brown spoke with an American accent for 45 minutes. The level of emotion in Millie's audition tape shocked Carmen Cuba and the Duffer Brothers. Equally impressive was her dedication to the character throughout the course of casting. She's British, and she did everything, including the Skype with the Duffers, in an American accent, Carmen said. So we sort of forgot that she even was British. She's pulling all of that acting off while also doing an accent, and at that young age, it was very impressive, as you can see on the series. It's a detail that sounds small but means everything. Millie wasn't just talented, she was committed, disciplined, and thoroughly prepared at an age when most kids are worried about homework. She had done the work, and it showed. But the process wasn't finished yet. Millie still had to fly to Los Angeles for a screen test. Millie Bobby Brown has told this next part of the story herself, and it's the kind of detail that makes people believe in something larger than coincidence. It must have been June or July of 2015 when she screen tested. They flew her from London to LA, and her seat number on the flight was 11. She was perplexed at the audition task and confused about where it could possibly take her, adding, "I was like, what the hell is this weird acting exercise? I didn't know that was the character. I didn't know she had powers." She arrived in Los Angeles, performed the scene, and waited. The Duffer Brothers didn't take long to decide if they'd found their lead. By the next day, they made the all-important call that would change Brown's life forever. They said, "Millie, would you like to be our 11? And I just fell on the floor," she said. "Then 2 or 3 months later, we moved to Atlanta, and my hair was gone." It would be a disservice to this story to skip past the shaved head too quickly, because it was a genuinely significant moment, both for Millie personally and for what 11 would come to mean to audiences. The Duffer Brothers had a very specific vision for 11. She was not supposed to look conventionally appealing. She was supposed to look stripped down, vulnerable, otherworldly. A shaved head was non-negotiable for the character. Millie was 11 years old when they shaved her head for the role. She was emotional about it. She didn't know how people would see her, but she did it. And when she looked in the mirror afterward, something shifted, not just cosmetically, but psychologically. The shaved head helped her inhabit 11. It changed how she moved, how she held herself, how she understood the character's isolation and power simultaneously. It was the beginning of one of the most iconic looks in modern television history, coming from a girl who was terrified of losing her hair. Once cast, Millie threw herself into preparation with a seriousness that was extraordinary for her age. Her directors gave her homework. They told her to watch Poltergeist, Stand By Me, and The Goonies, and basically if you put that in a blender, you get Stranger Things. For playing 11 specifically, the creators gave her a specific reference point. They told her that the performance that they wanted her to resemble was E.T. and sort of that relationship between E.T. and the children around him. Not a human character, an alien, a being who communicates almost entirely through presence and silence, who is clearly feeling everything but has no conventional way to express it. This was a radical brief for a young actor. Most acting roles reward dialogue, but 11 barely speaks in those early episodes. She communicates through expression, through stillness, through the weight behind her eyes. "I find it more difficult than actually having a lot of dialogue," Millie said, "because if I have dialogue, I'm more focused on the dialogue. But with my actions, I have to cry sometimes, and even if I don't have to cry, I well up because she's so emotional." The chemistry between Millie and Finn Wolfhard was found early. "I was working with Finn on the audition, and I knew from then that Finn and I had such an amazing connection and chemistry. We felt so strongly about the performance we gave." The bond between 11 and Mike, tender, loyal, and completely believable, was not manufactured on set. It was found in an audition room, between two kids who had never met before, who immediately made each other better. Stranger Things premiered on Netflix on July 15, 2016. Millie Bobby Brown was 12 years old. What happened next was sudden and enormous. Critics who had never heard of her wrote about her in terms usually reserved for acting veterans. The performance as 11 was singled out universally as the emotional anchor of the show, the thread that tied everything together. Here was a girl who spoke in single words and fragments, who communicated almost entirely through physical presence, who could convey grief and terror and fierce loyalty in a single held look. And she was doing it at 12 years old. In 2017, at 13, she became the youngest person ever nominated for an Emmy in the Outstanding Supporting Actress category. The record previously belonged to no one her age because no child had delivered that level of dramatic performance in a major series. In 2018, Brown was featured in the Time 100 list of the world's most influential people, and she was appointed as a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, the youngest person ever selected for that position. Her salary tells its own story. According to Variety, her salary grew from approximately $10,000 per episode in Season 1 to $300,000 per episode by Season 3. Season 4 reportedly pushed her earnings to around $450,000 per episode, making her among the highest-paid child actors in television history. In the span of a few years, the girl whose family had almost gone broke trying to get her this chance had become one of the highest-paid young actors in the history of television. Here is the thing about Millie Bobby Brown's story that tends to get lost in the glow of eventual success. Every single difficult thing that happened to her was load-bearing. If she hadn't faced the too mature rejection, she might not have been in England when the Stranger Things call came. If the Game of Thrones audition had gone her way, she would have played Lyanna Mormont, a memorable role but a small one. A few scenes across 3 seasons, and then the character is gone. Bella Ramsey got that role and was extraordinary. Meanwhile, Millie was cleared to be somewhere else, to be available, to be the right person for something larger. If her family hadn't pushed through the financial ruin, hadn't held on in Hollywood just long enough, hadn't made the decision to keep going when giving up would have been entirely rational, there is no 11. There is no Stranger Things as we know it. And if Millie herself had listened to the voice that told her to quit, the very understandable, very human voice that said this industry is too hard, the rejection is too much, the cost to your family is too great, she would have walked away from the thing she was born to do. Carmen Cuba, reflecting on the cast years later, said they were destined for what's happening to them. They're dedicated and curious and artistic and really enthusiastic about imagination. It's a romantic idea and maybe a true one. But destiny, if it exists at all, requires the people involved to keep showing up, to keep doing the work even when it seems pointless, to walk into one more audition room after the last one ended in rejection. Millie Bobby Brown did that, over and over again. At an age when most kids are still figuring out who they are, she kept showing up. The story doesn't end in 2016. That was just the beginning. After Stranger Things, Brown starred in and produced Enola Holmes, Enola Holmes 2, Damsel, and The Electric State. Industry reports suggest she earned approximately $10 million for Enola Holmes 2, placing her among Hollywood's highest-paid young actresses. In 2019, Brown launched Florence by Mills, her own beauty product line. In 2023, she released her debut novel, 19 Steps, based on her own family history. On May 27, 2024, People reported that she had married Jake Bon Jovi in a private ceremony. In August of 2025, Brown and Bon Jovi announced that they had adopted a girl. And through it all, the foundation has remained the same story. A girl from Bournemouth, a family that believed in something they couldn't afford to believe in, a decade of auditioning, a seat numbered 11 on a flight from London to Los Angeles. The final season of Stranger Things came to an end in late 2025. Nearly a decade after a 12-year-old appeared on screen with a shaved head and changed television, the chapter closed. And Millie Bobby Brown looked back on how it all started. It must have been June or July when I screen tested. They flew me from London to LA, and my seat number on the flight was 11. She fell on the floor when they called to offer her the part, and the rest, all of it, is history.